Here's a fact that will shatter your worldview. 99% of people believe billionaires achieved their wealth through fair competition. But statistical analysis reveals that 87% of ultra-wealthy individuals inherited their initial capital or gained unfair market advantages through regulatory capture. The fair play narrative isn't just wrong, it's a strategic weapon used against you. While you follow the rules they preach, they're playing an entirely different game with different rules, different referees, and a rigged scoreboard. Look closely at the world you were trained to respect. From childhood, you were taught that honesty creates success, that fairness protects you, that playing by the rules guarantees reward. That belief was not education. It was conditioning. It was designed to keep you predictable, compliant, and slow. Meanwhile, the people who actually accumulate power operate under a completely different operating system. They wear morality like armor, not like a conscience. They display virtue publicly while optimizing advantage privately. This is the moral mask, and once you see it, you will never unsee it. Every billionaire understands optics before ethics. They understand that society punishes visible aggression, but rewards invisible dominance. That is why you see polished interviews, charitable foundations, sustainability campaigns, smiling press photos, and carefully scripted humility. This public image is not kindness. It is insulation. It shields them from scrutiny, disarms critics, and builds emotional trust with the masses. While the crowd applauds the mask, the real work happens quietly in contracts, acquisitions, regulatory influence, data ownership, monopolistic positioning, and timing advantages. The mask buys silence. The mask buys patience. The mask buys freedom of maneuver. You, however, were trained to behave opposite. You were taught to be morally transparent, emotionally honest, and ethically loud. You signal your intentions before you act. You hesitate when advantage appears uncomfortable. You self-censor when opportunity requires sharpness. That hesitation is exactly what keeps you small. In power dynamics, hesitation equals surrender. The moral player becomes predictable, and predictability makes you exploitable. K-I-T-H-E moral mass is not about becoming unethical chaos. It is about understanding the difference between appearing ethical and being strategically effective. Machiavelli warned that rulers must learn how not to be good when circumstances demand it, because reality does not reward purity, it rewards outcomes. Power does not ask for permission. It moves through whoever understands leverage, timing, and perception. Think about negotiations. The person who reveals their limits first loses. Think about business. The company that exposes its weaknesses publicly invites pressure. Think about influence. The leader who broadcasts internal doubt invites rebellion. Transparency feels virtuous, but in competitive environments it weakens positioning. Billionaires know this. They control narrative, conceal intention, and release information only when it benefits their leverage. You must begin operating with dual awareness. Outwardly, you remain socially fluent, credible, cooperative, and aligned with accepted values. You build trust, reliability, and professional respect. You do not provoke unnecessary resistance. But inwardly, your mind must remain cold, calculating, and strategically alert. You track incentives. You observe power flows. You measure who benefits, who controls access, who sets conditions, and who absorbs risk. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding structurally. This is where most people fail. They confuse kindness with safety. They believe moral signaling protects them from competition. It does not. It only advertises vulnerability. The moral mask allows you to move silently while others expose themselves. It allows you to gain position without triggering defensive reactions. It allows you to extract advantage without declaring war. Notice how dominant players rarely argue loudly. They rarely explain themselves excessively. They rarely seek validation. Their silence creates uncertainty. Their restraint creates authority. Their calm creates psychological gravity. They allow others to reveal their desperation, their boundaries, their emotional triggers. Information flows toward the patient strategist. When you adopt the moral mask, you stop oversharing your goals. You stop announcing your plans prematurely. You stop seeking approval for ambition. You stop apologizing for wanting more control over your life. You learn to smile while positioning. You learn to cooperate while calculating. You learn to listen while mapping leverage. This is not manipulation for chaos. This is survival inside competitive reality. If you refuse to understand power mechanics, power will still operate on you. You will simply remain unaware while others move you like a chess piece. Kawaii The moral mask teaches you one ruthless truth. Your internal strategy must never be visible to the crowd. The world rewards the player who controls perception while shaping outcomes behind the curtain. When you master this separation between appearance and intent, you stop being emotionally reactive and start becoming structurally dangerous. You move differently. You speak differently. You choose timing differently. You stop leaking leverage through moral exhibition and start compounding quiet advantage. Step into any system that promises fairness and observe closely. Look at the stock market, at corporate hierarchies, at government contracts, at tech platforms. Everyone is told to compete, to play hard, to trust that effort equals reward. But the truth is far colder, far simpler, and far more strategic. The arena you are standing in was designed long before you arrived. Not for your victory, but for the benefit of those who built it. Billionaires do not win because they are morally superior or ethically disciplined. They win because they designed, controlled, or exploited the arena long before you were even allowed to enter. They understand the rigged arena principle. This principle is deceptively simple. If you compete inside a system you do not influence, you will always be at a disadvantage. The rules are not neutral. They are a product of someone else's leverage, biases, and timing. Tax codes, regulations, venture funding flows, media amplification, digital algorithms, and social perception funnels are all structured to amplify the advantage of the architects. Every minor decision you make within that system is being filtered, measured, and shaped by rules that were not designed for your success. You are told to work harder or be ethical, but those are not strategies, they are distractions. They keep you busy while the real players manipulate the playing field. Notice how billionaires rarely compete directly with each other in traditional ways. They own the platforms, the pipelines, and the gatekeeping mechanisms. They do not engage in equal, risk competition. They create asymmetric environments where one move can produce compounding gains, while the opponent remains constrained by legacy rules. The illusion of fairness is maintained not by equitable play, but by carefully constructed perception. The spectators believe they are watching a competition. In reality, it is a controlled game, a rigged arena, where only those who understand its structure can survive and thrive. To survive inside this reality, you must first recognize which arenas are rigged and who controls the levers. Observation is critical. Map the channels of influence, the bottlenecks, the information flow. Identify who sets the rules and how they benefit from them. Then, either reshape the arena or create a parallel one. The key is not to fight within someone else's architecture. The key is to control the environment, to dictate the flow, and to create conditions where your movement generates disproportionate advantage. If you cannot own the arena, own a choke point within it. That choke point can be a network, a niche market, a distribution channel, or even control over perception itself. Most people underestimate the power of arena design because they are emotionally invested in fairness. They assume that merit, talent, and effort should naturally lead to success. But effort without positional awareness is wasted energy. The rich and powerful do not measure their gains by the hours they spend or the effort they exert. They measure their gains by the structural advantage they extract from the system. This is why insider knowledge, timing, and control are far more valuable than hard work alone. KY Note 2 Tchi Regidia PRNCIPL is a brutal truth. Competing blindly is surrendering. Victory is not about working harder inside someone else's cage. It is about understanding who built the cage, why it exists, and how to either own it or bypass it entirely. Every system you enter has a skeleton of power beneath its surface. Most competitors see only the flesh, the rules, the apparent fairness. The strategist sees the skeleton. They manipulate it, exploit its weaknesses, and bend it to their advantage. The arena is never neutral. The illusion of equal opportunity exists only for the compliant, the knave, and the distracted. Those who understand the rigid arena principle do not ask for fairness. They engineer leverage. They identify bottlenecks, exploit asymmetry, and reposition themselves in ways that multiply advantage while minimizing exposure. Their victories appear effortless, not because the system is just, but because they have mastered the architecture of control itself. Once you internalize this, you stop playing by the illusions others have set before you. You stop treating rules as sacred and begin treating them as tools, levers, and constraints to manipulate. You stop reacting to the arena and start designing it, controlling it, and exploiting it strategically. Every move you make becomes intentional, every interaction a source of leverage, every opportunity a potential choke point that advances your position in ways most competitors cannot perceive. Look at the stories the world tells you about success. You are trained to believe that reality is objective, that results are earned purely by effort, skill, or intelligence. That is a comforting lie. In truth, perception moves faster than reality. Control the story, and you control the reactions of every competitor, investor, ally, and adversary. This is the essence of Kawaii Otatara, The Nari Wanapan. Those who master it manipulate reality before it even exists, bending the world toward their advantage, while others remain blind to the machinery behind their rise. Billionaires, power players, and elite strategists never underestimate the influence of narrative. They understand that humans are pattern-seeking creatures, easily swayed by certainty, charisma, and coherence. When a story is repeated convincingly, people begin to behave as if it were true, regardless of underlying facts. This is why the wealthy invest not just in capital, but in narrative construction, media presence, social proof, selective disclosure, strategic alliances, and public appearances. Every detail is calculated. Every message is curated. The narrative is not optional, it is structural leverage. Most people try to compete by working harder, producing more, or shouting louder. They focus on outcomes they can control, ignoring the reality that perception often dictates outcomes long before actions manifest. You could create the most innovative product, solve a major problem, or offer unmatched value, and still fail if the narrative surrounding your effort is weak or misaligned. Investors, customers, and collaborators will interpret your efforts according to the story they are told, or the story you allow them to perceive. The unseen hand of narrative determines who is elevated and who is ignored. The narrative works because it preemptively shapes expectations. It gives you authority, credibility, and inevitability in the eyes of others. The billionaire who appears destined for success rarely leaves room for doubt. People invest emotionally, financially, and psychologically in the story long before the metrics confirm the outcome. This is why timing is crucial. Control the story early, and the world becomes your co-conspirator. Fail to control it, and you are merely a reactive participant in someone else's narrative. The strategic application of this principle requires a cold, analytical mindset. First, identify the story the world currently believes about you, your market, or your opportunity. Understand its weaknesses, its gaps, and the leverage points where perception can be shifted. Then, craft a narrative that positions you as essential, inevitable, and rare. Every public statement, every social interaction, every digital trace contributes to the architecture of belief. You are no longer merely producing. You are signaling dominance, authority, and inevitability simultaneously. KYTNRATIV EPOWN is not about deception for its own sake. It is about preemptive structural advantage. It is about ensuring that before anyone can react, your position is psychologically secured. When narrative precedes reality, you dictate how resources, alliances, and opportunities flow toward you. Observers will rationalize your success after the fact, but the truth is you have already engineered the conditions that make success unavoidable. Those who fail ignore this principle. They assume transparency equals trust, hard work equals recognition, and competence equals elevation. They misunderstand the psychological architecture of influence. Perception controls access to resources, attention, and authority. Competitors who underestimate the narrative weapon find themselves outmaneuvered before the first move is made. Allies and adversaries alike respond to the story, not to the hidden mechanics behind it. Mastering the narrative weapon means you stop explaining your value after the fact. You stop pleading for recognition or validation. You control the narrative's tempo, sequence, and framing. You allow others to react to your constructed reality, rather than dictate their reactions through brute effort alone. This is the strategic leverage most people never understand. The world obeys the story more willingly than the facts. And when you understand this, you stop competing on skill alone and start commanding on perception. When deployed with precision, THENRATIV OPERAN allows you to operate with a preemptive advantage. You create inevitability in markets, authority in networks, and dominance in perception. While competitors expend energy reacting to circumstances, you bend the environment toward your intent. The moment you internalize this, every public interaction, every partnership, every strategic decision becomes a tool for shaping reality before it even exists. You stop being a participant and become an architect of the outcomes themselves. In the world you occupy, the default assumption is that effort equals reward. You are told to trade time for money, labor for value, energy for advancement. That is the narrative the system wants you to believe, because it keeps you predictable, measurable, and limited. The truth is far more ruthless. The wealthy and powerful do not exchange time equally with outcomes. They do not operate under a proportionality that you assume is natural or fair. They understand KOTIV, ASYMETRXERXT8ION. They harvest maximum advantage from minimal exposure. And this is how they build empires, while others remain trapped in cycles of effort that never compound. Look at how billionaires structure risk. They do not gamble blindly. They position themselves where upside is unlimited, and downside is mitigated or outsourced. They invest in equity rather than salary. They create licensing deals rather than working hourly. They acquire control over platforms and pipelines rather than producing individual products endlessly. One strategic move in their world can yield a cascade of returns, while the average worker exchanges every hour for an equal, fixed wage. This is not luck, it is design. Asymmetric is a framework for understanding how control and leverage multiply advantage quietly, invisibly, and powerfully. Most people ignore asymmetry because they are taught fairness matters. They assume every effort should carry equivalent reward, and that equal labor should yield equal recognition. That assumption makes them predictable. It keeps them chasing outcomes linearly, while billionaires operate logarithmically. One decision, one insight, one structured position can yield tenfold results compared to a lifetime of fair effort. The key difference is not intelligence. It is the ability to position oneself where leverage compounds and exposure is minimized. This is why those who study shortcuts, efficiency, and ethics without understanding leverage remain mediocre. To apply asymmetric, you must first map where imbalance exists in any system. Identify where others are forced into linear effort, where bottlenecks control value distribution, and where rules favor those with structural advantage. Then, redirect your resources toward these points of leverage. You create mechanisms that produce returns, even when you are not actively engaged. Your influence, your capital, your decisions, and your control over networks must scale independently of your labor. This is how wealth, authority, and influence are extracted silently, efficiently, and with minimal exposure to risk. Billionaires also understand timing in extraction. It is not enough to be positioned. One must know when to act, when to hold, and when to release pressure. Leverage compounds fastest when applied in sequence, at the moment when the system is most susceptible. While most people react to immediate demands, they fail to see the latent power of strategic patience. The successful strategist acts deliberately, extracting advantage in moments invisible to the untrained eye. KYTIV. asymmetric teaches that success is not proportional to effort. The world does not reward fairness, consistency, or loyalty. It rewards structural advantage. Every contract, every investment, every negotiation is an opportunity to capture value that others cannot reach. When you internalize this, you stop trading hours for dollars or effort for recognition. You start designing situations where leverage does the work for you. The beauty of asymmetric is that it creates a silent dominance. Competitors remain trapped in visible struggle, while you accumulate invisible advantage. Others exhaust themselves, trying to match output linearly, while you multiply influence exponentially. One strategic position can produce returns far beyond any individual effort. Control pipelines, control distribution, control knowledge, control perception, and you control outcomes. Those who do not understand this remain trapped in effort, visible, measurable, and exploitable. When you implement this mindset, your energy shifts from labor to strategy, from repetition to positioning. Every move you make becomes a lever to extract maximum value with minimal exposure. You are no longer vulnerable to the tyranny of fairness or the illusions of effort. You operate structurally, anticipating, leveraging, and harvesting in ways that ordinary participants cannot even perceive. The world rewards the architect of extraction, not the worker of hours. Every powerful player you admire, every billionaire you envy, operates with one principle that most people never even recognize: freedom of movement is power. KYOTV XALDOPTIONLITY is about cultivating the ability to act without constraint, to maneuver strategically without fear of collapse, and to control outcomes because you are never trapped. While most people bind themselves to jobs, single investments, or limited networks, the truly powerful maintain multiple exits, alternative paths, and hidden leverage at all times. They are never desperate, because desperation equals predictability, and predictability is death in strategic environments. Look at the structures of the ultra-wealthy. They maintain diversified assets, multiple business lines, networks across industries, and the ability to deploy capital anywhere in the world at any time. They do not rely on a single income stream, a single reputation, or a single alliance. This is not over-caution. This is intentional design. Optionality is the engine that allows them to take risks others cannot. It allows them to act aggressively while remaining insulated from failure. Where ordinary participants are constrained by dependency, they move freely and strategically, positioning themselves to seize opportunities that appear too late to everyone else. Most people fail because they underestimate how much leverage optionality provides. They tie themselves to a single role, a single city, a single skill, or a single relationship, and when disruption occurs, they are trapped. They are forced to react instead of act. They are forced to negotiate from weakness instead of dictate from strength. Optionality is not luxury. It is survival. It is the difference between being a reactive player and being the architect of outcomes. When you understand optionality, you stop fearing loss because you are never without a path, a backup, or leverage. Code NOAOI also requires emotional detachment. You cannot maintain true freedom if you are emotionally invested in outcomes that limit your choices. Wealthy strategists and powerful operators cultivate a mindset where attachments do not define their capacity to act. Opportunities are evaluated for structural advantage, not sentimental value. Decisions are made from a position of calm observation, not panic. They maintain control by keeping alternatives open, by preserving mobility, and by never allowing themselves to be dependent on the whims of a single system, institution, or individual. This is why the desperate negotiate poorly, why the attached miscalculate, and why the unprepared fail in predictable ways. The strategic application of QOPTIONLITY requires you to constantly map dependencies, identify points of constraint, and develop alternatives that give you leverage. Financial optionality is only one aspect. Network optionality, geographical optionality, skill optionality, and informational optionality are equally critical. The wealthy do not place all their influence, capital, or attention in one basket. They hedge not because they are timid, but because they are architects of asymmetrical advantage. Each path, each exit, each hidden lever increases their ability to act decisively at the right moment while others remain frozen. Optionality also amplifies psychological power. When you are free to walk away, you control negotiations. When you are free to pivot, you dictate market terms. When you are free to redirect influence, you command alliances. Desperation is visibility. Optionality is invisibility. The moment you internalize this, every choice becomes an opportunity, every engagement a potential source of leverage, and every risk a calculated position, rather than a binding constraint. Kiwaidu v. PTIONLIDY teaches a ruthless truth: power flows to the player who can move unencumbered. Those who cling to single points of reliance surrender their agency. Those who maintain multiple paths, hidden leverage, and uncommitted options operate structurally, unpredictably, and dominantly. Optionality is not merely about survival. It is about designing conditions where others' mistakes become your opportunity. It allows you to act with patience, confidence, and inevitability, while ordinary players exhaust themselves fighting imaginary scarcity and fear of constraint. When you adopt QOPTIONLITY as a strategic mindset, your life shifts from reaction to orchestration. Every decision, every relationship, every investment becomes a lever in a system you control, rather than a trap you endure. You stop being hostage to circumstance and start engineering the conditions of your advantage. Optionality transforms uncertainty from a threat into a tool. And that transformation is the silent engine behind every sustained accumulation of power, influence, and dominance. In a world obsessed with fairness, moral obligation, and approval, most people are conditioned to ask permission before action. They wait for validation, seek consensus, and hope the system will recognize their worth. That hope is a trap. Kavai, Tichi Savai Gnt Run, is about rejecting the illusion that the world owes you fairness or respect. True power does not come from begging for acknowledgement or adhering to external rules. It comes from claiming authority over your own actions, your own leverage, and your own destiny. Sovereignty is the ultimate strategic position, the apex from which all influence, negotiation, and extraction flows. To understand sovereignty, first observe the contrast between those who are free and those who are bound. The bound follow the rules because they believe rules are sacred. They adhere to social norms, professional etiquette, and moral codes that restrict their options. Their movements are predictable, their decisions constrained, and their leverage limited. In contrast, sovereign operators act with deliberate authority. They understand that rules are tools to manipulate, not commandments to obey. They decide when to comply and when to bypass. They tolerate discomfort because they know that discomfort is the price of autonomy, and that autonomy multiplies opportunity in ways obedience never can. The Soviet also requires a mastery of self-governance. External systems, alliances, and networks are always imperfect, unreliable, or hostile. Relying entirely on them is surrender. Sovereign strategists maintain internal control over knowledge, capital, and networks. They cultivate optionality, redundant influence, and structural independence, ensuring that no single failure can dictate their position. This internal sovereignty creates freedom, and freedom is the most potent form of leverage. When you are unbound, you dictate terms, negotiate from strength, and exploit opportunities that are invisible to those constrained by dependence. Consider how this principle applies in high-stakes negotiation or market dominance. Those who operate as sovereigns are never desperate. They can walk away at any moment. They can wait for the optimal conditions. They can threaten exit without fear because their control of alternatives makes them unpredictable. Desperation is the weapon of the weak. Sovereignty is the weapon of the effective. When you embody sovereignty, you become the center of gravity in any interaction. Others adjust to your position, your terms, and your timing. They respond to your initiative, not dictate it. Sovereignty also demands clarity of purpose and ruthless prioritization. You cannot claim authority over your life while allowing distraction, indecision, or emotional attachment to dictate choices. Every action must be intentional. Every engagement must reinforce your structural position. Ordinary players expend energy reacting to circumstance, absorbing stress, and defending fragile positions. The sovereign expends energy only to increase leverage, secure autonomy, and manipulate outcomes. The difference is not effort but precision, not persistence but strategic focus. Kiwat v. Tichi Soviet Rhyme is not about chaos or aggression without cause. It is about self-command in a world designed to impose dependence. It is about recognizing that fairness is a fantasy, that morality is a tool, and that control over outcomes flows to those who act decisively and structurally. Sovereignty means you stop seeking permission from systems, individuals, or societal norms. You operate as the authority over your own sphere. You design conditions where your will becomes inevitability, where leverage flows toward you, and where external contingencies cannot dictate your movement. When you internalize the savoir igntydrm, everything changes. You no longer measure yourself against the rules or expectations of others. You no longer beg for opportunity or defer to perceived fairness. Every decision, every negotiation, and every strategic move becomes a statement of independence. You operate with intention, control, and detachment. The world begins to respond to your design rather than your reaction. The moment you embrace sovereignty, you stop being a participant in the game and start becoming the architect of outcomes, the director of leverage, and the ultimate strategist in a system built to constrain those who lack courage and vision.